cost of a bad sales hire is there's a lot of different numbers out there, but when you really factor in the soft costs like opportunity cost and having a bad person on payroll who's just not going to make quota, and the fact that that doesn't let you hire your next sales hire, it's somewhere around 20 times annual salary. My honest advice would be, if you're hitting revenue milestones as founders, keep doing what you're doing and don't hire salespeople.
Mike Gordon, thanks so much for joining the pod. Very excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah. Hey, just a little bit of background on this podcast, What Work Podcast. Tyler and I do this podcast to essentially meet with friends and colleagues to essentially pick their brain on one particular area of expertise that they have that we're interested in learning more about. And our hope is that we record this thing and other people get some value out of it too. That's pretty much it. We're asking you to take us to school today.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. That's a big ask that you're hoping people will get value, but we'll see what we can do.
They'll get it. Yeah. And given your background, I think the school part should be easy for you. That's effectively, you're taking people to sales school, I feel like, oftentimes.
You could say that. I won't disagree with you there.
Yeah. So today, the topic that we wanted to ask you about was hiring your companies, when a company's hiring their first sales reps. What are like the best practices? What's worked for the companies that you've worked with, you've worked at, and maybe some call outs of like, hey, what to avoid or what to try to not do, what didn't work in some past experiences. Tyler and I have kind of seen from the outside looking in on some of the companies we worked with on different hires and how they worked out. But you've, given your experience, have seen so many examples of this, have done this yourself. So we're really excited to have you on here and hear from your expertise and learn from you. Speaking of your expertise, you have a tremendous background. I wouldn't be able to do it justice, but would you mind just giving us in the audience just a brief background on where you're coming from and what you're up to today?
I'd be happy to. So I'll go even back a little bit further than maybe you're hoping, but I was almost a high school dropout, wasn't a great student, joined the Marines, spent 4 years there, did special operations. One of the things I learned about there was training, process, system. And when I got out, I went back to college, did really well, graduated, and my first job out of school was in sales. I had a political science degree, which either means that you're going to law school or it's pre-unemployment. So got into sales, and one of the things I found in sales is that there's really not a lot of systems and processes that people or companies follow. And as a Sandler person, a sales trainer, I work with companies, individuals, entrepreneurs to really create a systematized process for selling anything related to sales, whether that be bringing on new salespeople, onboarding them, creating a common process and common language. So that's what I do. And it's no different when what we're going to talk about today, as far as figuring out what is the best practice, what is the process for bringing on whether it be a first sales hire or a 10th sales hire. Most companies and people have the same common challenges, especially when it comes to sales. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. No, thanks for that background. And it's cool. Like you're also here in Los Angeles, like Tyler and I, and have been in sales and in the tech scene here for over a decade now. So pretty cool. You've seen a bunch.
Yeah, man. Now that you say that, I feel old, but over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, so let's jump into this. We want to hear we want to kick off this lesson. Take us to school. I'll tee this up like maybe we do a little role playing here. Imagine like Tyler and I were two young, handsome, intelligent.
Whoa. Now you're getting
we're doing we're getting ready for Halloween here. We're doing a lot of pretending here. Technical
Fiction.
co-founders. There's two of us.
Mhm.
We started like an AI startup maybe a couple years ago. We've been at it building the product, but also doing our like leading sales, kind of like founder-led sales, scrapping, using our network, reaching out a little bit too now. We're hitting some revenue milestones, and we think it's the right time to hire our first sales hire. What would your like high-level advice be for a couple guys like that?
Ooh, well, my honest advice would be, if you're hitting revenue milestones as founders, keep doing what you're doing and don't hire salespeople. That's going to be the toughest job you've ever done. No, What would I say? So maybe I could answer that question by kind of painting a picture of what most companies do and where most companies go wrong. And then we'll kind of unpack that and talk through some of the tools, best practices, and things that people could actually implement when going about hiring a first salesperson, second, or 10th salesperson. So here's the problem. I guess some of the biggest problems I find when I've talked to companies that are hiring salespeople. Number one is, as managers, we're not very good at interviewing. And I don't say that as a knock on somebody, but we're just not trained to do it. Nobody's ever taught us how to do a really effective and efficient interview. So there's that. Number two is, most people don't know what they're looking for when they start looking for a salesperson. So even if you had part one, meaning you were a great interviewer, you may be asking some really good questions, really drilling down into what's the reality of this person. Is what they're telling me valid? Have they really, done the work, had the experience, accomplished the things they said they were going to accomplish? But most people don't know what they're looking for. And when I say they don't know what they're looking for, I'll give you a common example. If you talk to a small business owner, an entrepreneur who grew a company, did all the selling themselves, and now they say, "Hey, I'm going to go. I need to find a really good salesperson." And they'll say, "I talked to somebody that worked at Oracle or IBM or any one of the big companies, and nothing against Oracle, IBM, any of the big companies, but that's a very different role. That's somebody who's typically probably met with a lot of existing clients, got overlays, did add-on sales, sold new product lines to people that already had a contract or an MSA or an SLA or something with." And it's really simple. They're really just doing add-on business, repeat for warrantied up opportunities. Whereas the person that's going to a smaller company is going to need a very different set of skills. So number one, they probably had an assistant, a support team, sales operations, revenue operations, and they had a very limited scope of what they need to do. But now this person in their new role is going to need to know how to prospect. They're going to probably need to know how to pick up the phone and make cold calls. They're going to need to go out and sell in an environment where they probably don't have the name recognition or the brand recognition. So figuring out what it is you're looking for first, I would say, is absolutely critical. You need to know what you're looking for, and the more specific you can be in figuring out what that person is going to need to do, the better off you're going to be. And then when you move to the interview process is really just saying, "Hey, let's take exactly what needs to happen in this role and really match this person up against that." And if we do that, we can really drill down into the questions and say, "Okay, well, I saw you sold $150 million last year, but tell me about a time that you had to build a brand new territory when you had no client list and not a lot of brand name recognition." And you may just go one question deep and figure out that that's not the person, but we all know salespeople, even bad salespeople, can put on a good show for 60 minutes. So you may get an answer, and then you can drill down further into that and start really figuring out, is this person who they say they are, by saying, "Well, tell me an example. When you went about building that brand new market in a totally green territory, what were some of the things you did? What were the behaviors?" And you may get an answer to that. "Okay, so if you're telling me you're making 50 calls per day, how many conversations did you have? How many calls did you need to make in order to get a meeting? How many of those meetings turned into a proposal presentation? How many moved to a close?" And at some point, you're going to figure out pretty quickly, even with a salesperson and tell a good story, is this really the right person that I'm looking for? So to answer the question, what is some best practices? Best practices is, the more specific you can get about what it is you're looking for, the less likely that you're going to hire the wrong person.
Yeah. Mike, what are some of those like qualities if you were to like give someone like a worksheet, like give us a worksheet, like, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, you what you need, like you mentioned, like startup versus like enterprise experience, the
Yeah, or
ability to source, to do like full cycle, essentially everything
yeah,
from research and cold calling all the way to closing deals. What are those different like categories, or do you think about it that way?
or
Yeah, absolutely. So we
yeah.
actually have this all templatized through Sandler, but we work with what's called the search model, and search is an acronym for skills, experience, attitude, results, cognitive ability, and habits. So if you think about SEARCH, so SEARCH. those six different categories. And this is a great team building exercise that founders can do with their team, or it's an even more interesting thing if the people that are looking to build out this search model do it with their existing team, because they may start sending an important message. But we think about, what are the skills that this person needs to have? And if we think about that, maybe that's prospecting, maybe that's picking up the phone and cold calling, maybe, it could be something as simple as CRM. But the more granular and specific you can get with this, the fewer surprises that you're going to have once that person shows up on the job. So that's S. E is experience. What is the experience that this person has? So, maybe that's selling to VP and C-level people at mid-market companies, which could be a very different skill. And I think I told you this when we first spoke. My first B2B sales job was working for Paychex. So I was selling to a lot of really, I guess what you call mom and pop entrepreneurs, people that started a business, maybe had a couple of employees. So expecting that person to be able to go and jump right into a sales role where they're now selling to executives at bigger companies, it's not to say they can't do it, but that's a big jump. And so you need to consider, as you look at the full picture, does this person have 80% of what we need? And 80% is kind of the number that we like to look for, because below that, you're going to have to spend a lot of time doing training, getting someone caught up or getting somebody comfortable in that situation. Or there may just be so much work to do that this person's not going to have enough time to ramp up and be profitable and hitting revenue numbers when you need them to. So that's the E, is experience. And again, you could probably put anywhere from 4 to 6 different types of experience. Again, another type of experience that somebody might need to have is selling a product where there's not awareness that there's a need for it. And I'll give you another quick example is, if you're selling insurance, pretty simple. Every business owner has insurance. Pretty simple to call and say, hey, and not in these words, but I sell insurance. You open to a conversation. And again, don't use those words. That's terrible. But if I call you, the idea of business insurance is not a foreign concept to you. You know what it is. But if I'm selling something like, let's say, sales training or outsourced BDR services or help, most people don't know that service exists. So that's being able to pick up the phone and create awareness and, I guess, desire, demand for that is a very different skill than selling something that is common and people know about. So that's example number 2 of experience. Attitude, which is the A component. What is their attitude? Is, when I think about myself, and if I were to want to hire someone like me, my attitude would be win at all costs, as long as it's legal, moral, and ethical. And that's not necessarily going to be what the attitude is for everyone. But if I'm looking for someone like me, I want somebody who's going to, as long as it's legal, they're going to fight to the end to make sure that they get the win, as long as it's in the best interest of everyone. Another attitude might be, serve clients first, whatever that is. Maybe, this is a lone wolf, or maybe you want somebody that works in a team selling environment. And if you're in tech and you're selling an enterprise type product, then yeah, maybe maybe you do need somebody whose attitude is collaborative team type environment. So that's the attitude component. So R is results. And you look like you have something to say, Mike.
Oh no, I was saying SEARCH in my head.
Yeah, thank you.
We're all doing it right now. This is actually a spelling lesson today.
Yes. Can you repeat the question? Can you use it in a sentence?
I'm now going back to like this morning, literally in the car with my daughter. We're like A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
So
sorry,
continue.
Yeah,
I'm
a visual person, so I'm looking
attitude
up R. So R is results. So there's 2 ways to think about this, but one way, the best way I think, is to say, if this person's on your payroll for 12 months and now it's the end of 12 months and they've been really successful, what are the results that you want them to accomplish? So we can compare that to their past results. Because if you want somebody that's closed, let's say, 10 deals for $1 million, that's very different than somebody that's coming from selling 100 deals. And I think, again, Paychex is a good example. Somebody that sold 100 deals during the year and maybe had revenue of $200,000, because that's a very transactional type of sale. Whereas selling $100,000 deals to 10 different companies over the year is definitely a bigger ticket price. So again, think about what are their results? Have they done that? Maybe have they hit quota consistently for the last 8 quarters? That may be a result that you're looking for. C is cognitive ability. This talks about how do people learn, how do people process information. This is typically something you can't train or teach people how to do. So if you're bringing on somebody that is going to need to learn a lot of information quickly and be able to apply that in the conversation, that's cognitive ability. That's how people process information. So if you're, and we'll use the example that we're talking about now, if you're looking for an account executive who's going to need to be onboarded, learn a complex or sophisticated product, and be out on the street selling in the first 30 days, then you need to think about what is their cognitive ability. Does this person have the ability to learn quickly and implement this information? Because again, nothing wrong if they don't. And if you have a sales force of 20 and this person's going to have a 2-year ramp period, that's fine. You have the time to give that person 2 years to ramp. But if this person is make or break, you need revenue, you don't grow without it, you don't get your next funding, nothing else happens, then you need to think about, can this person learn quickly and hit the streets? Or like, if not, maybe they just need to have the similar background and experience in the industry. So that is cognitive ability. And then finally, the H is habits. So what are the habits that we want this person to have? And again, no right or wrong answer, but I think a good habit for a salesperson to have is that they plan their week out in advance on Sunday. They update their CRM daily. Another one I think is exercise. What is the workout routine, or how do you deal with stress? We all know that sales can be a stressful thing, and you show me a salesperson who doesn't exercise frequently, and I'll show you somebody who's really stressed out and burned out. So habits could be any number of different things, but again, we treat this search document or this search worksheet as kind of a living, breathing document within an organization, because you're going to have your first iteration as you start bringing someone on. You may have been said, "Hey, we totally forgot that we really want this person to be able to do X, Y, and Z," and you can add that into your skills. So again, the more you can really define the ideal, define the perfect candidate, the better job you're going to be able to do of making sure that you're not getting surprises after the fact.
Totally. Do you recommend, you mentioned 80%, I think is what you said, for you'd want them to fulfill, call it 80% of search. Do you recommend weighting like the individual, call it, letters, categories, saying, we want, cognitive ability is a little bit over experience in this case. We're going to put cognitive like first, experience more towards the bottom, or do you ever look at it that way?
Yeah, and so you can definitely put must-haves and nice-to-haves, and I
Sure.
think that's maybe a simple framework to do it. Look, if you have Salesforce and you're saying, "Hey, look, we don't have time to train this person on Salesforce. They have to know how to use it when they get here because nobody's gonna have time to train them." You can put that on. And the reason I say 80% is it's pretty easy. You have both ends of the extreme. You have like, "Hey, we're desperate and we're going to ignore all the red flags and just hire someone." But you also have the other end where you can actually be very thoughtful about this, build a search model, and then have somebody say, "Well, they don't have everything we're looking for." And you're usually not going to find somebody who's 100% at everything. Or if you can find that person that's really specific, they're going to be a really expensive hire to make. So shoot for 80%, knowing that they're going to, no one's going to be perfect. And some of these things you're going to give them once they're on board, once they're on payroll.
You
Yeah.
mentioned it triggered something for me, but basically mentioned like kind of where is the company at in terms of their own kind of growth cycle, right? And the analogy that came to my mind, I'm not sure if you heard this one, of the analogy of like the dirt road. Have you ever heard that one with startups? It's like you basically start off you're hacking your way through the jungle, and then you eventually get to the dirt road, and the end goal is you become like an Oracle or something like that. Those companies they're on the highway. It's like smooth, relatively smooth sailing. You're able to get a lot of speed. But the point being is that for each one of those stages, there are people that work really well in the jungle and not so great in the highway, or dirt road or that sort of thing. Is that I guess the question that I have for you is around how aware, especially if you're working with, say, like a founder on their first sales hire, how aware are they of where they're at in the process in terms of like the resources they have available and the type of person they really need to come in, um, to be successful as a salesperson? Or does it kind of, everyone kind of, no one thinks their kid's ugly. So, right, is it that type of thing where they're like, oh, this is selling, this would be easy.
Y- yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's maybe a couple ways to answer it. Is sure, it's important for founders to have that conviction about how good their product is, but at the same time, you also have to be realistic and say, even if you as the founder, and founders usually do a good job of selling, because they understand the problems that they're fixing, because they've usually created out of a need that they have themselves, and they're they have the conviction, the ultimate conviction. Nobody believes in it more than them. But as far as how they think about it, and I think that's why the search model is really practical, is because you can fit just about anything that you could bring up, jungle, dirt road, you know, highway. The attitude might be in the jungle is somebody who's scrappy. And I've worked at a startup as, hire number 4 or 5. And I mean, you do a lot of, there's a lot of different hats you need to
Sure.
wear. And if you can't wear a lot of hats, then that would probably be something you would want to, articulate and document in your search model before you went looking for someone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think so. Speaking of which, and was that startup Edgecast that you're referencing, the one that you were 5 or 6,
No, no,
or a different one?
I came in early, but not that early. I think I was
Okay.
probably like, I don't know, like the 15th sales hire. I worked at a company called Zen Edge, and
Hmm.
I mean, like really, really early. The founder CTO was my sales engineer. Um, so there was no admin, there's no sales admin, sales operations. It's like we did everything, and for everything from I did everything from prospecting, booking meetings, sending out contracts to get signed, uploading them into Salesforce, like the whole nine. And so that would be, I guess, my example of probably jungle, that you're scrappy. You need to be able to do a lot of different things. And to the other end of that point is, if you think about, like you mentioned, the Oracle or the fast highway, I think I don't think I would be a terrible fit there, because
Me too.
I'm just, that's not me. I'm not a polished guy that would enjoy having meetings with the same book of 10 existing clients, taking them out to golf, entertaining them, and just doing add-on business. That's not
Yeah.
my cup of tea. So that wouldn't be a good fit.
So I have a theory on that note, and I'm curious. Maybe you could do a little self-diagnosis of your, what it is that makes yourself, Mike, in those situations successful, because you clearly were, right? I have all in my personal experience, I've watched salespeople come in and I've watched them succeed, or I've watched them burn out very fast. And I was mostly same thing. I've been mostly a jungle dirt road person basically my whole career. And I would say like the one common thing that I saw was it was their ability to build really great relationships with their internal team, their colleagues, and communicate very effectively. So I guess my question for you is, do you feel like that's something that you did, at those various companies? And also, like, what is it about, in addition to that, what is it about you that makes you an effective first hire for a company? Because a lot of companies that are going to be making their first sales hire, they're going to be in the jungle or the dirt road part of the journey. So, like, what is it about yourself that made you successful in those experiences?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me think how to answer that. If you ask me now, I think I'm a great communicator. Right? That's a lot of what I do. Good sales is good communication. At the time, I was definitely not a great communicator. What I think, or what I know made me successful, is that mindset of, and maybe it came from being in the Marines, that look, I mean, sales is a tough gig all by itself, but when you're, number one sales hire at a company, not only are you dealing with the challenges of prospecting, finding people to talk to, but you're dealing with things like, hey man, I got this opportunity that they love what we do, and our we just went down. Our SaaS platform just went down, and so I've got to deal with that. Maybe I just lost a huge opportunity because of that, and now you got to be able to pick yourself up really quickly. Know that you can't, spend the next 2 weeks feeling bad for yourself, and then get back on the horse to try and find new opportunities because you're going to be out of business. So I think it's just dealing with adversity, knowing the
Sure.
end goal, and being committed. Because I can tell you, in almost every sales role, you're going to be dealing, even if you're great, you're going to be dealing with a lot of no's. So you got to be okay with that. And you got to be able to have, maybe I'll call it short memory, to realize, hey, that happened, but on to the next, because everybody in our team and my family likes to eat. And if we don't get some stuff sold, then we're all going to be hungry.
Yeah,
Totally.
Mike. So yeah, you're talking about like resilience and grit, and we walk down the kind of the search framework. That seems like a lot of information to try to get from a candidate through that vetting process in like
I
one
think I
interview.
think there's
And
only one way. You got to put every candidate through like a live. I'm thinking like Marines. We do like live paintball, some type of war scenario.
Totally,
Think you go.
yeah.
I think you
Water
move from
waterboard
the
them.
Zoom. Yes, yeah. You could do whatever tactics. You got to get it done. Put them in a live combat situation. No, no.
yeah, the
Yeah,
But
well,
toughest
yeah,
so
hunter they've ever been. But like, no, I'm asking about how like what does an interview process look like, right?
yeah,
If
yes.
so
Tyler and I, we've never made this hire before. We're making our first sales hire. What does that even look like? What does that
Especially
process look like? How many
especially at
interviews are there?
yeah.
Yeah.
And especially at a
What kind
company, I was going to say less than like 15 employees, let's call that, or less than 20
yeah.
employees.
yeah, I love that question, because that takes us to kind of a different place here. And I'll ask this question of you guys, and I'll ask it of anyone else that's listening too. Think about any hire you've made. How much time did you spend preparing for that interview?
Great
Hmm.
question. Yeah, I'd love to tell you. In my days of being an employee, I would say probably at least like 30 minutes around there. But in my days of being a founder, 5 minutes. It's
Okay.
hard. A lot
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. So 30 minutes is, I mean, Tyler, good job. That's the most I've ever heard. But a pretty simple rule of thumb is, if you're going to do an hour interview or a 90-minute interview, spend an hour getting ready for it, or 90 minutes getting ready for it. So, and I'll give you another kind of idea to kind of marinate on. the, the cost of a bad sales hire is, there's a lot of different numbers out there, but when you really factor in the soft costs like opportunity cost, and having a bad person on payroll who's just not going to make quota, and the fact that that doesn't let you hire your next sales hire, it's somewhere around 20 times annual salary. So, you know, even on a low conservative estimate, a bad sales hire, a missed sales hire, is going to cost a couple $100,000. So think about the last time you spent a couple $100,000. If I don't know, maybe you have a Bugatti, but if you've ever bought a home, you certainly spend some time researching, getting ready, understanding what you look like. But then we go to make the sales hire, and we spend 5 minutes getting ready for it, and we wing it. And so we end up missing all the things we're looking for. So spending that time to prepare, and look through their resume. You can look through a resume and start finding red flags just by doing a glance, or you're going to find some clarifying questions of, was the number one rep in the company. Okay, but what does that mean? How many reps were there? Was there two reps and you were number one? If my revenue last year was $6 million, and you're looking for somebody who's able to hunt and bring in net new opportunity, how much of that was net new revenue from new clients versus existing clients? And a lot of times you'll hear, oh, that was all from existing clients. That's a red flag. That's a
Hmm.
big that's a big red flag. So how do you answer all these questions? you have the search model, you have an idea of what you're looking for. What you're really trying to understand is, if we were to take this search model and put it in front of us, how do we ask, which questions do we ask to find out if this person is really going to be the right fit? Some of the questions are quick, like, do you have experience using Salesforce? Yeah, well, tell me about it. Tell me where you learned, how much time you had, blah blah blah. That's a pretty simple one. But again, if we go back to the new revenue versus, you know, revenue from existing clients, you're definitely going to want to ask that, and you'll get some answers. Some people may know you're looking for net new, and they'll say, "Oh, well, 50% of that's net new." All right, so how many new clients was that comprised of? And you'll get some answer. Okay, great. What was the average deal size that you're working with? And so as you start weaving through this and going 3, 4 levels deep, you're going to find inconsistencies.
Yeah. So is this usually done
Totally.
like in one conversation, Mike?
I, mm, Yet no. I want to say yes. So if I'm helping a client interview a salesperson, the first thing that we're gonna the first and there's a screening process, and you'll save a lot of time by just doing a 10-minute phone screen to weed people out, or even better,
Mhm,
having somebody else in your organization just do a phone screen. The first interview it's probably going to be 90 minutes, because
mhm.
you want to dig through. You want to find out, is this really the right person? And then I think a really good best practice is have people from other parts of the company, if you have other
Yes.
parts of the company, do the interview. But here's the secret, because people say, "Oh, well, we'll have another department interview them." But they ask their questions, whatever. They don't. They're just going off of what they think, and that's the biggest thing. We People make sales hires, or all hires in general, subjectively. Do I like this person? Are they like me? Do I feel good? And there's so many biases that can go wrong. The I'm desperate for someone bias, where you start ignoring the red flags. I like this person. They seem like me. I like them. Start ignoring red flags. But if you share the search document with other people in your team, they're going to be able to ask the same questions and look for the same things. And they may hear different things. And then everybody can have a debrief at the end and say, based on your conversation with candidate A, did you really feel like she has the ability to go out and hunt for brand new opportunities? Do you feel like they're organized enough to manage an 18-month sales cycle? And some companies have an 18-month sales cycle, and some people just aren't organized enough. I mean, like, if you ask me if I could, how well I would do handling an 18-month sales cycle, not good. Not good. That's high levels of organization aren't my thing. So I would not be the right person for that job. But if everybody's looking for the same thing, everybody's asking for the same questions, you're going to get a lot of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say you touched on something really interesting. Is that the guidance? I'm a big fan of the interview by committee is probably not the right term for it, but having your peers at the company, especially the people that are going to be working with that salesperson a lot. I love having them interview them. My intentions are twofold. I of course want to find out if the candidate's the right person, but I also want to hold on to the card later on when that person says, I don't like that sales guy or sales girl or salesperson. We'll be like, well, you were a part of hiring them. So, these red flags that you're suddenly pointing out, you had the opportunity to screen them. And I think it's really good. You're giving them buy-in. You're giving them an opportunity to opt into that person. So when they work with them later on, which is really great. And the guidance piece, I totally agree with Mike. I find that especially with non-sales folks in the organization, they're coming with a lot of bias. The funniest one to me would be like, I didn't like that person. I don't like that guy. They were too salesy. And I'm like, right, we're hiring a salesperson. So, yeah. So, kind of giving them, an understanding of, hey, here's what we're looking for. And I don't know if you feel like this is a good best practice, but we would often give other folks in the organization some specific things to dig into. We'd say, hey, coming from your position within the company, I'd love your thoughts on what their true technical expertise is. Do you feel like they're competent in these areas? And I felt like that yielded some really, really great notes versus just thumbs up, thumbs down?
100%. And again, I think maybe I could sum all this up in a sentence by saying the interviewing process should be objective. Objective meaning we know what we're looking for, and we're asking objective questions to say, does this person match the criteria that we're looking for? And it's pretty simple. It's yes, yes they do, no they don't. And then as you move through the process, at some point, yes, you'll want to do an interview for cultural fit, meaning does this person match our values? Would they fit in here or not? But again, if you do that too soon, you're gonna start saying, "Hey, I like this person. They seem like they'd fit in really well here," and we start ignoring the the objective things that we're looking for, and bias kicks in, and we start saying, "I like this person. That I really want them on the team," and we ignore what could be potentially a red flag.
Sounds like dating. You
Yeah,
introduce
yeah,
you introduce your buddies to your new girlfriend, and they're like, "Dude, there's some problems. You gotta," and then you like your rose-colored, glasses. You cannot see the truth.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, do the buddy sniff test. Later in the
Yeah.
process, once you found out that that potential life partner is checking all the other boxes.
What are some? You've mentioned process a couple times, which I appreciate that one. And I'm curious, what are some of your go-to questions to get an understanding of, is someone a process oriented person, understanding that process has many shades to it. There's everything from somebody who, they write their notes on like actual napkins or something like that, to somebody who they're they're like, if it's not in Asana, it doesn't live in my brain. So I'm kind of curious, how do you ask a salesperson, questions to reveal if they actually are process oriented or not?
Yeah, and so there's a term, it's called behavior based interviewing, and it makes it really simple to say, tell me about the process you use to stay on top of your pipeline, or tell me about the process used to take a prospect from hello to close sign deal, and let them talk. I mean, that's the easiest way to find out the truth, is have somebody walk you through what it is that they do.
Well put. And then Mike, sorry, I'm dominating here, but I just got you bring a bunch of stuff that's making me think. How
No, go for
how
it.
the heck do you ask questions to figure out if someone's got grit or not? I think grit's one of those intangibles, and it's hard to get an objective answer, I guess, to that one.
Mm.
So, like, how do you uncover an interview process? You mentioned being kind of like objective here. How do you objectively determine if someone has grit or not?
Yeah, I will say, tell me about a time that you worked really hard on something, you put in a ton of effort, and you kept failing, but you stuck with it, and you ultimately came to either success, or you got to the point where you said, "Hey, this isn't going to work, and we need to try something new and different." And again, let them tell me a story.
Yeah, the stories. Mike, sorry, it looked like you were looking to chime
No,
in.
that's super helpful. Those are great questions asked, Mike, Tyler, because yeah, those are super helpful as we're thinking about hiring and recruiting ourselves.
Yep.
But Mike, honestly, one of my brain's been kind of stuck on this number that you mentioned earlier. So I've been listening,
Hmm.
I've been part of the conversation, but it got stuck when you said a bad hire could cost 20 times annual salary. Is that
Right.
is that is that right?
It's a
Yeah.
lot.
That's like mind blowing to me. Like I never thought about it like that, but that's a huge number. It's a huge financial blow, especially to like any company really. But could you kind of like bring us behind the curtain on that one? Like where are those costs coming from?
Yeah.
There's the obvious ones, right? Like
There's
the salary of that person, obviously. And
of course. So
uh,
you have salary, benefits, cell phone if they have it, internet, all the different things, software licenses, and those are what people typically think of. But here's the other part, and this is the really expensive part. Let's say you hire, we'll say, mediocre candidate A. Now they're on your payroll, and so year one, their quota, their goal is $1 million, but they're mediocre. They don't push it. They kind of lollygag through the day. Instead of making 100 calls per day, they do 30. And so now, it's the end of quarter one and they've closed $25,000. And maybe you say they're new, they're ramping, they're still figuring things out, but now it's quarter two. It's their second quarter on board, and instead of doing the 250,000, maybe they've got $50,000. And quarter three, so you extrapolate this to the end of the year, and now you have somebody who, maybe you figured it out at this point. Hopefully you figured it out way sooner, but you're like, I really I hope they're going to make it because we're invested in them. We've spent time, we spent money, and
Mm.
but we don't fire them. So now they've gone through an entire year. Instead of producing $1 million, they produced $250,000. And so now, instead of bringing on having $1 million and making your second sales hire, who at the end of the year of year two, you'll have $2 million net new revenue. You now either have to hope that this person is going to have a miraculous turnaround in year two, or you have to let them go and start all over with the interviewing, the hiring, all the time that's taking costs money, new software licenses, all that stuff. So you finish if you have the right person, you finish year two with $3 million in total revenue from the past 2 years, or you finish year two at
Yeah,
$800,000, and it's exponential. The
that's
cost
Yeah.
of a
yeah.
bad sales hire is
Well, I think like it's interesting, Mike. You're bringing up something that I didn't think about, but the cost of like a mediocre hire seems like sounds potentially more costly than an obviously bad hire.
a
Because an
Yeah.
hundred,
obviously bad hire, you can
You
make
a
make the
hundred,
right
a
Joe
hundred, a
adjustment.
Mouth.
But you're
hundred
talking about
percent.
this interesting, like
Yeah.
this middle area,
Yeah,
or maybe like a low performer with inklings of potential. That
Right.
person can
yeah. So
become like a
fifty
very
percent of
cost.
50% of sales hires are going to fail out in their first year, which is a crazy number. But then the scary part of that is those 50% are typically the bad hires. It's the mediocre ones. So you figure if you're using kind of averages, if you have your 10% of high performers, that means you know if you hire 10 people in the first year, which most people don't, one of those people, half of them are going to be gone. One of the five left is going to be a good person, and the rest, those four people, are going to be mediocre performers.
Yeah.
And they don't leave because they have nowhere to go.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Just trying to light on like where the costs come from. I never thought about it that way. The cost of like a mediocre hire versus like a obviously poor hire. And the reason why I asked initially, Mike, is because the next time I'm preparing for an interview or not preparing for an interview, I am going to. So I personally need this like negative reinforcement. I need
There you
these like
go.
what didn't work anecdotes in my head to remind myself to actually do the work leading into these interviews.
Yeah, and so like I said, it's if you've ever bought a home, especially in California, it's an expensive purchase, and we spend time. We go around, we look at properties, we make a list of the things we want, but we go and make that hire, and we don't do the due diligence, we don't spend the time, we don't slow it down to speed it up.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think so this is just all rings all too true for me. My experience working at an outsourcing startup, we would always interview these very senior, very tenured, experienced sales executives from much larger BPOs, outsourcing companies, call center companies. And to your point, I don't know if you find this. I find that with salespeople in particular from big companies, the revenue numbers. I think you hinted on this a little bit, can be so misleading because you look at somebody who sold to the example that in the world of outsourcing is like some of the biggest companies that outsource a ton are like the telcos, right? AT&T, Verizon, et cetera. There's a lot of customer service that goes along with that. And so you'd have these salespeople that would have these outlandish numbers on their. I used to look at resumes, and I would get a little bit like nervous. You gave me kudos unfairly about my 30 minutes of prep. I prepared like that because I was a salesperson who was extremely insecure about my sales experience. So when I would get asked to interview these seasoned salespeople, I would prepare like the Dickens because I was like, they're going to be like, I'm going to work with this guy. This guy's a clown. So I would really think a lot about that. But I would get very intimidated by these resumes because I'd see these numbers, $100 million deal, $15 million deal, $20 million deal, etc. And only later on did I learn, after going through a number of these and really uncovering the details of these deals, that these salespeople, they were effectively order takers. A lot of times, AT&T, there's only 3 or 4 outsourcing companies that can actually service AT&T's business. So when they come to you, you don't have to source the opportunity. They're just, here's the RFP, fill out the RFP, fly to AT&T's headquarters in Dallas, take executives out to steak dinner, do your pitch, fly home. It's
And you have a
very, very different.
33 and a third percent chance of winning the deal because there's only two
You're
other
one of
competitors in the
four.
market.
Exactly. So it's really it's hard work to uncover it, and I think that Mike and I are definitely guilty of it. It's hard to always put in that work to figure it out. I will ask one last question on my part, is just related to, um, what's you mentioned, really, with your business, you're going in and you're implementing process, right? I gotta ask, what's the crazy? You don't have to name names, but what's the craziest, kind of consulting, coaching situation that you've walked into in terms of them really not having anything? So, like, everybody's ashamed of the way their CRM looks, but what's the most ridiculous setup that you've walked into?
Well,
Deep breath.
I think you kind of nailed it with your question, is no process.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's not uncommon to see in smaller companies, but it's also not uncommon to see it in bigger companies where they have no process for hiring. I mean, I've clients who've called me and said, "Oh, hey, like, hey, I met someone at a trade show and I'm making him a job offer." And it's like, wow, like I mean, that's an example of a bad process.
right.
And I don't think that's uncommon for most companies to just not have a process for something. And I mean, it's prevalent everywhere. I mean, here's another example that was, I guess, more specific about a year and a half ago, but just having an interview process. And an inter- I can say, like, a best practice for interview process is, a 10-minute phone screen, um, first interview of 90 minutes, second interview with someone else on the team, final interview, job offer. And again, it doesn't need to be rocket science. Like, process should make things easier, not simpler. But when you look back a year and a half ago, there is a lot of competition for people, for talent in the marketplace. So to be able to tell a good candidate, hey, look, here's the process that we're going to go through to pick the best one. It's You're going to do a phone screen, 90-minute interview. From there, you're going to have an interview, a second person on the team, final interview, and then we're going to be, you know, scoring the candidates and making offers. If you can tell someone that, they know what the process is, and there's such a higher likelihood that you'll actually keep them in the process rather than losing them to another company
Sure.
just because they didn't know. So again, process is meant to help keep everyone on the same page and keep everyone aware of what's going on. It's, I'm the same way as a salesperson. It's, I say, oh, I go process, like that's just a lot of work, but it should make things easier, not harder.
Totally. And I think you're ringing a lot of bells when I think about, because you're touching on also the candidate experience, right? When I think about talking to someone and they had a really bad experience as an applicant or a candidate for a job, to me, it always comes down to two reasons. One being, the person showed up to the interview having not prepared, right? So it's like, I didn't interview with the CTO. They hopped on. They didn't know my name. They didn't know what I was interviewing for. They hadn't looked at my resume. That's one. And then the second one is, we've all heard it before. I interviewed at this company and I never heard back from them. That really sticks with people. And it's kind of crazy how it's a very small world. And it's like, eventually, that person's going to be in an experience. What was crazy to me always was that when we did it right in my old company, we had people that we didn't extend job offers to that referred us business, which is, to me, it was like, that's how you run a really great process. Keep the candidate consistently updated, be very transparent in your feedback, show them that their time is very valuable, and it can yield really great results. But we also had the negative too, of course, when we were in high growth spurts. We had times where we totally let the ball drop with candidates, and they told us exactly what they thought of us.
Yeah. And as a candidate, I mean, look, as a company that's hiring, look, like I know they still need to qualify themselves to you, but you're looking for good people that'll help you grow the
Totally.
company. And so if you give them a bad experience, like I wouldn't. I mean, it doesn't get better from there. If somebody doesn't even take the time to know your name when you show up to an interview, it's going to tell me, well, this person is a total disaster, and if I come to work for them, they're going to be that manager that cancels the one-on-one every single week, 20 minutes before our one-on-one's supposed to happen. They're not going to be organized for a sales meeting. There's going to be no agenda. Everyone's going to waste time, and it's just a sample of what's to come. So I think it just is in everybody's best interest to have a simple process. And again, it doesn't need to be rocket science, but having a process, even if it's a bad process, is better than having no process.
Trust the
Yeah.
process. I'm a
Trust the process.
Philadelphia
Speaking of process
76ers fan.
and valuing your time, Mike, we promised you we'd wrap things up around this time. So, hey,
Yes.
as we wrap up, we want to give you the opportunity, just like where can people find you? You've shared so many great insights with us, and we're excited to share this podcast with folks. But if people want to reach out to you directly, where is the best place to do that, and how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so I'll give three ways. Easiest is by phone. That number is 310-433-3151. Email is michael.gordon@sandler.com, or you can go to my site, which is www.gordon.sandler.com. That's easiest way, or I'm on LinkedIn. So
I love the
The
fact that
phone-
you just gave out direct contact information.
That's amazing.
That is a salesperson true and through. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
That's that certification right there.
And,
Truly,
and
true sales guy.
heck yeah. And I'll tee up one better here, Mike. So my guess is that hopefully this little What Worked podcast falls in the ears of some folks out there. Specifically, I would imagine, because Mike and I talked to a lot of these people who are doing founder-led sales, right? So my question to you here is, would you be willing to jump on calls? This is like a kind of introductory, just open, let me just, share some quick feedback, maybe advice, no like immediate selling of your services per se, but like twofold. One is anybody who's out there who's a founder trying to learn how to be a better salesperson of their own service. And then two, a founder who's maybe thinking about hiring their first sales rep, account executive. Would you be open to, just chatting with somebody?
100%, yes.
There, you heard it. So,
Awesome.
so insert
Direct
code
line.
What Worked podcast for your free consultation with Mike.
Yeah, yes.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. This was fun. I feel like I did a lot of talking, and I'm totally like hot and sweaty, and the air conditioning in my office isn't working.
That's
But
Passion.
this was an interview. We were trying to extort the information out of you. So yes, this
I
was
know I feel
all
like I just finished the waterboarding session.
exactly. We got you. Exactly.
Thanks, Mike.
You survived, so expect the offer in your inbox by the end of the afternoon.
So. Oh, awesome.